Very good. How's everyone doing? Everyone feeling good? Good? I still see people. Good, good, good. We're here, last but not least, what's near and dear to me, because I also cover a lot of security technologies like firewalls and web application firewalls. And so this last session is straight at the jugular of security. We got Phatak, who is from Cyber Ratings. I've known Vic going back many years because in the industry I used to work in network security appliances. But he's here with a couple panelists that he'll introduce and discussing enterprise and security. And so, Vic, why don't you come out with your panelists, and I'll hand you the floor.
So thank you all for being here, and thank you for joining.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah.
Yes,
so to my immediate left, I have Francisco Artez, and he is Vice President. I'm not sure your exact title.
Vice President of Product Security.
Okay, at Aristocrat.
Yeah.
And Michael Berger. And Michael, do you guys want to tell us a couple seconds about yourselves so that?
Yeah, sure. So I'm heading Munich Re's Insure AI team. So Munich Re is a big reinsurance and insurance group. It's also one of the biggest cyber insurers in the world. And what my team does is it essentially structures insurance solutions for AI models. So for example, if an AI is making more than a certain number of mistakes and financial costs occur of those wrong predictions, then this is something what we would insure.
And Francisco, do you want to tell us?
Yeah, so my roles are usually one of two in an organization. It's actually been both at Aristocrat. First I was their CISO for a number of years, so my focus and concentration was on their IT, or information technology infrastructure. And then you'll commonly see me move over to product security roles, which is actually focused on the OT, or operational technology infrastructure. And that's the way the company makes money with the technology that they deploy, not necessarily the fundamental financial systems and core technologies that would be used to operate the company.
Okay, so I'll start with you. What is it that you strategically are spending time thinking about, things that are moving the needle that they should probably know that you care about?
Yeah, so if we're looking at SaaS, right, for example, it is how do we move to the point that we are accelerating in the same way that we are with traditional cloud, so infrastructure and capabilities that you'll see us doing like AWS, GCP, and so forth, and how do we move to the full automation of that that represents what we've already done. So this is enablement and empowerment to the developers, right? So they can roll out infrastructure or network as they need it without necessarily needing to bog down the IT department, because typically speaking, your IT department doesn't move at the same scale and speed as, say, your developers do, which impacts your time to market and other aspects, time to start generating, recognizing revenue, and so forth.
So what can they do to help you on that journey?
I mean, if you looked at what caused the hyper-acceleration with things like Google Compute Engine and AWS and Azure and so forth, it was the empowerment that came through allowing corporations to start moving into more of a federated model for the development of technology and rolling it out. And that is, like I said, those tools that allow individuals that may not be super technical in that discipline, right? So we'll have a developer will roll out hyper-service or microservice containers, and they'll roll out firewalling, basic firewalling, and so forth. And they aren't necessarily a network engineer, right? But we do have network engineers, and they need to see what has been rolled out, make sure that it conforms to policies and procedures, so they can set global rules and so forth over that. And then at the end of the day, also accounting. Accounting was where we finally gained control over standard cloud infrastructure to the point that a corporation like us could just roll it out and be very, very comfortable with it, because I didn't have individuals with a corporate credit card going and signing up for a subscription in AWS, and next thing we know, we have a $750,000 bill at the end of the month, right? Because they forgot to turn it off when they were done doing their experiment. So those are the kind of lessons learned and things that help a corporation adopt and accelerate any form of cloud technology.
So is it an impediment if a NAS provider does not have the ability to provide you governance control? I mean, not necessarily for micromanagement, but just so that you know generally what's going on or have reporting capabilities.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the first major leap. I would say the next thing that would keep me up at night is worrying about functionality and interoperability for escalation and identification of, say, cyber attack or cyber incidences, right? And we're just starting to see more and more of that within Google and AWS and so forth. So, and those are providers allowing us to run application services, right? Database backends and so forth. They're not our actual infrastructure, which would be the bigger danger, right? Because that's now going to become a new attack vector.
Right. So now if you're talking network as a service, you need to have confidence. Is that it's secure? Is that?
Yeah, especially when you look at what have we built in classical infrastructure, like when we're building it ourselves and it's not as a service. Getting to a maturity level where we can test efficacy and performance capabilities of inline security products and routing products and so forth, and then wanting to have that same capability when we move into a service is going to be a very big deal for companies of this size or companies of this level of maturity, especially when I go once a year to London and meet with Michael's company and AIG and Aon and Lloyd's and everybody else to talk about our underwriting, and they want to see that maturity. How are we monitoring that? How do we know? How do we know that that IPS that's in line that just had some rules changed didn't change the efficacy or capability to protect the assets that are sitting behind it? Therefore, it's not becoming an insurance claim, right? So, those two levels of maturity are really where, from my role, that I would be looking at very heavily in an infrastructure as a service solution.
Okay. So Michael, very different role, AI, right? And you're in charge of risk regarding AI in Munich Re, yes? Okay.
Yes.
So what is it that concerns you? And I mean, obviously everybody in this room is probably looking to rolling out AI in one form or another. Maybe we start with what would you want them to know?
Yeah, so first of all, I think it's important to understand that an AI is essentially just a probabilistic model. So what an AI at the end of the day tries to do is to infer really the probabilistic relationship between some output given some input. So that's what it does. But this also means that an AI is by nature, or will have by nature, always a certain kind of probability of making a wrong prediction, making a wrong or associating a wrong outcome to a certain kind of input. So this kind of riskiness of AI is natural. So I think from a company's perspective adopting AI, as well as from our perspective in insuring AI, it's very important to understand what is this kind of uncertainty of an AI for a specific kind of use case. I think that's a very, very important question. And we are working with AI vendors as well as data science teams at bigger enterprises to really try to quantify this kind of uncertainty in AI models and then also ensure this risk. And an example is our partner Glaucover, who is also here today, who basically utilizes AI in order to predict malicious network traffic. And they also understand that AI will always have some uncertainty to it. In order to alleviate doubts from their users' perspective, they are providing guarantees to them. Guarantees about how effective the AI will be in detecting malicious network traffic, but also how efficient it will be in doing so. So how many false alerts it will cause. And we are standing then behind those guarantees and basically taking over this uncertainty. And we can do that because we analyzed those systems and basically found a way to estimate this kind of uncertainty. And I think really understanding this uncertainty, estimating uncertainty of AI, that's very, very important when you're looking into deploying AI in an enterprise.
Okay, so what are the types of measurements that they should be thinking about when it comes to the AI?
Yeah,
Right.
So I think from an AI perspective, it doesn't matter so much if it's a, say, a very fancy model which is used or whether it's a very simple model. At the end of the day, it will matter how well does the respective model perform. And I think the first question to ask is, or the first thing to look at is, yeah, how can I set up a statistically reliable testing regime to really test the AI? And I think especially in cybersecurity, when we are looking into AI to detect certain malicious attacks, then I think it's very, very important to test it well. To test it against different samples of malicious code, of different sample compositions in terms of percentage of malicious code versus benign files, in order to really determine how let's say the error rate of such a model will look like and how this error rate will basically behave. So I think looking really at a statistically robust testing regime is the first important factor. And there it doesn't matter so much what kind of metric is used, whether it's accuracy, whether it's something which is called recall or precision scores, or F1 scores for classification problems. This doesn't matter so much as long as the testing process is statistically robust and encompasses wide enough samples to really make and infer a good statement. And then I think the other two important factors are then really the monitoring and the monitoring processes of the AI solution, and also the retraining. Because the AI will need to be a living thing. It will need to adjust to incoming data and changes in the data. So the retraining and how an AI is retrained is a very, very important consideration.
So it's interesting because a couple of years ago we ran into an AI from a cybersecurity company that learned the wrong lesson. So it saw signed certificates and said these are all trustworthy, right? And then instead it said, well, I don't really care if they're signed by a certificate authority or third party, or if they're self-signed, right? So suddenly you had self-signed certificates, and the bad guys figured out they could sign something, and with a snake oil cert, and they could bypass the security, right? So the retraining in that case would be, no, hold on a second, it's got to be a valid authority or something like that.
Yeah, and
right.
I think here it's important to make sure that basically this kind of data is then really checked, and basically the new data used for retraining does also not just contain benign examples, but also contain malicious examples. Because otherwise, as you have outlined, the AI might just pick up patterns which it shouldn't pick up, and basically will make wrong decisions when they're used in production.
So I'm curious, in terms of the audience, how many of you are actually looking at AI from a business risk perspective and talking to folks like Munich Re or your insurance carriers about underwriting that risk? Is there a show of hands?
If you're not doing so yet,
okay, I've got a couple hands.
We're here.
So, I mean, how many? I mean, is it something that everybody should be thinking about, or?
Yeah,
I know you're the insurance guy, so I don't. I mean, you're probably going to say yes, but if take that hat off and just, is that where you see everything going? Is that something that, if they're executives, they should be considering how they're?
Yeah, I would say so, because I mean, as I've outlined, AI is basically just a probabilistic model. So there's always a probability that the AI will make mistakes. There doesn't exist any AI, and there cannot exist an AI by the nature of what it is, which is faultless. So this does not exist. So the question is, how faulty might it be? So this is more the question to ask, and this is then also the topic of essentially trying to quantify and manage and understand the uncertainty which comes with AI. And I think this is very, very important in asking those questions, either to the internal data science teams who are building your models, or to the AI vendors where you're procuring your models. How uncertain is your model, and can you provide basically some evidence that you're carrying and assessing this kind of uncertainty? I think this is very, very important. And I think if an enterprise is basically utilizing AI on a larger scale, then this also means that the enterprise is utilizing AI because it wants to automate a certain process, or it wants to make better decisions.
That's a good point. So for them, In terms of the service providers supporting their customers, right? So Frank, I mean, you would potentially be, and I'm sure you are a customer of
Yes.
a number of the folks in the audience, and you've worked with the insurance folks. Is there something you maybe would want to pose to Michael? And now that
Yeah, I mean, you know, a very big part of my role is, you know, in this and several other companies has always been going and presenting in person when it's time to renew our underwriting, right? For cyber especially, and now this will fall under. So I know that the underwriters see it as two separate insurance products at this point. I'm sure my company or any company I work for in the future will see it as one basket, cyber and how we're doing AI, because it's going to be privacy issues and intellectual property protection issues and so forth. So it'll fall underneath that same umbrella internally. You know, Michael, what would be, for example, you know, things that you would be looking for in a presentation from the executives of a corporation coming forward and presenting to you, this is what we are doing with our AI, this is how we plan on implementing AI, these are the controls that we're planning on putting around our AI to make sure that we don't have, you know, I would assume intellectual property leaks and privacy leaks, because as you said, it's faultless, so having hallucinations isn't going to be, I think, something I'm going to go to insurance for, but my developer sticking, I don't know, the cryptographic hashes in there that we use for probability matrices for jackpot payout might be an issue.
Yeah, I mean, hallucinations can also be an issue if you're, for example, say if you're using ChatGPT or some kind of, let's say, model trained on a GPT 3 or 4 as the foundations models in order to try to automate code generation. So for programming, if you want to make this more efficient, then of course hallucination means that the model will produce code which will not run. And basically if it does it too often, then financial costs might occur out of that. You might need to hire additional programmers, additional developers for that. And this would be a risk what we could basically shoulder and take over. But I believe by taking over this kind of risk, the insurance industry as a risk carrier can also support AI adoption. Can also support companies like our partner CloudCover to basically really find adoption for AI models which we believe are trustworthy or essentially trustworthy enough also for the risk and the uncertainty that they contain. I mean, other risks, what you have mentioned in terms of IP infringement risk, also leak of sensitive information. I mean, we are already seeing, here in the US, the litigation when it comes to IP infringement. I mean, OpenAI and with its tool ChatGPT being sued by the Writers Guild in Hollywood because of copyright infringement. Also, the DALL-E tool and basically the image generation tools. There we also see lawsuits against IP infringement. I think this is also a risk which is there and which will increase. And there I think it is very important that proper technical mitigation means are put in place, because of course in the training data of those kind of models, it's not possible to remove just copyrighted information. Those kind of powerful models need as much data as possible in order to really achieve the level of performance which is required. So it's by nature also required to leave this kind of copyrighted information in the training data. But then it comes to the output. Can we somehow control that the model will output something which is not close enough to some kind of copyrighted image? And I think this, looking into this kind of technical mitigation means and estimating how effective they are, this is quite important for us.
So Michael, I mean, what would you want to ask Frank, I mean, or know from him?
Yeah, from my side, the interesting question would be, where does AI adoption stand on your agenda? And when it comes to AI risk, what risks would you consider to be important from an enterprise perspective? And how would you think about managing those kind of risks from a, let's say, adoption perspective within the enterprise, but also towards your customers?
Yeah, I think those are very good questions, because those are the ones we asked ourselves internally, right? And we begat a AI council built with chief officers in the company that anybody with an AI idea has to submit it through before they get permission to use it. And this is important when you have 9,000 developers working for you and everybody wants to build something new and cool. And you're asking them to now pass it through that council so we can at least vet what information they want to put through. So when we see ideas about using AI to automate where we don't have necessarily enough human resources to look at it, especially say on the cyber side, right? So you're looking at terabytes worth of data in a week on just log information on infrastructure. That SIM or that information that you're putting into more often than not turns into a forensics tool rather than the burglar alarm that it's supposed to be. And with AI, we find that we can actually analyze that data in real time much faster, especially as it's adapting and learning, in order to tell us that we have a problem or we have precursors to an attack, right? So those kind of things get greenlit because we're looking for ways of automating data that we're benignly taking in. But where you'll see pause and hesitation might be another team might come forward and say, well, what we would like to do is get to market faster, and we think we can do that through two routes. Number one, hiring even more developers that you're never going to okay, right? Or we would like to start using AI to help us in development of simple code modules and so forth. And usually there we point out, no, we're not interested in that, right? Because you're going to have to feed it enough of other code for it to learn what it is that you're trying to do or how it is that we're programming or how to interact with the rest of our system. And you're sticking that out into the public domain, right? So those kind of things will get a no, and then more things that are benign in nature, and we're looking for, well, how do we just process data faster? Right now, for us, are getting a yes in how we use it, and you'll see that whether we're talking infrastructure as code or we're talking, log aggregation in from application services and so forth as well.
So when you think about some of the technologies that they're bringing to market, NAS, SASE, I'm just trying to think of how to phrase this. Like, what can they do to provide you with confidence or to provide you with what you need? Because I'm sure they're going to be, not on top of everything else, it wouldn't be silly for them not to be using AI in some fashion.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, a carrier's use of AI is going to be far more beneficial than my use of AI to watch the same segment of infrastructure. Just as my use of AI to look at, endpoint protection data, like from an EDR or something, which is antivirus for everybody not keeping up with all the new acronyms in cybersecurity. My view is just the tens of thousands of endpoints I have inside of my corporation. But Cisco's view, for example, is millions upon millions of endpoints using AMP, right? If you're using their FireAMP, their EDR product. Their capability to leverage and use that as learning material for an AI is obviously far better and results in far fewer mistakes, hopefully, because they have more iterative processes.
Right, so the service providers having...
So the service providers implementing AI to look at infrastructure attacks or misconfigurations or changes that might be taking place is going to be far more beneficial than me running my own or even getting a snapshot of just what it is that I've deployed. It's nowhere near the amount of data that they would get from the full background of what they're doing.
So is that something you would, if they came and said, we have this offering, is that something you would consider buying?
Oh, I would even go, I would take it a step further. I would go to one of them and start that as a new business process inside their company, because if you sat there and sold that as an intelligence feed, you'd probably make even more money from the infrastructure you're already building. But that metadata and being able to collect it and provide alerts and information is, sitting there waiting to be used. But yeah, absolutely.
Okay. And so covered a lot of ground here. So Michael, I know we had some conversations obviously before this. I'm trying to um, from a audience perspective, is there something that you think they probably have not been told about AI, or considerations that they, because again, we're talking executive level, right? But that they should be asking their employees?
So I would say, first and foremost, don't treat AI as a mythical being. So it's really not. And then really asking questions about, okay, how do you think about this kind of uncertainty control? How do you think about the risks, the downsides which come from that? And what do you do in order to mitigate them? Because I mean, we need to accept that if we basically use AI, then we also accept a certain objective error rate. So this just comes with it. And we need to basically be ready to accept that. But then of course we can also have an objective discussion around what do you do in order to mitigate this kind of risks. How does your testing look like? What is your result of the testing? How do you mitigate basically changes in the incoming data? What do you do with that? How do you mitigate for side effects, especially if your AI is consumer facing? I think this are very important questions to ask.
So is that something that you actually, I mean, if they, after this come up, do you help folks with that? Like, is that part, I mean, I don't honestly know, is that part of your job that you're helping organizations figure this stuff out?
So not really, so we're not a consulting a service there, but of course as part of our risk assessment and pricing, we are looking into that. And of course we are also sharing the insights that we have, and if we think certain kind of processes can be improved, then we will also make those observations, those statements. But our job is not to basically consult on that. There, I think, are other organizations much more suited for that. But we have really built up a team of research scientists within Munich Re who are looking into this topic of uncertainty quantification when it comes to AI models. And this AI includes really the machine learning models as well as reinforcement learning models. And interestingly enough, when you look into this topic, it's still treated as something like a niche area in academics, surprisingly, but also in particular in the industry. We in the risk business find this quite surprising, because it's of course a major factor to think about when you trust a model with making certain decisions, especially when they are financially sensitive, like in the cybersecurity side. You should also think about risk. You should think about quantifying this risk. From our side, the research scientists in the team are also contributing with their own research to this topic. So we are working, for example, with the University of Oxford, also with the University of Stanford, publishing own research papers on how you could, say, automatically quantify the uncertainty in certain models. So this is something what we feel is also quite necessary to get educated on that. This is also something where we want to give back to the data science community, to the mathematical and statistical community, some of the insights and work that we gained and what we are doing.
Okay. Well, so I think, well, it says we have plenty of time here. We started early and we're actually missing one panelist. There was a gentleman from the General Services Administration from the government who was supposed to be joining us, but because of the impending shutdown, they had him cancel travel for all this week. So we've been kind of dancing, trying to fill a little bit of time here with 2 instead of 3 panelists here. Is there anything else we should add, or I don't want to just fill the time for the sake of filling the time. We covered our questions.
No, I think veering a little away from AI and just focusing on network as a service and so forth. And you had asked me a question earlier on what would help accelerate that utilization inside of a company, especially for developers, which is where my mindset usually is, right? Because I want to take things like this away from the IT department, and I want the developers to be able to build what they need, which includes infrastructure. And it took a number of years until we saw Google and everybody else get to the point where we could use things like terraforming and so forth to do infrastructure as code in order to build up systems. So, and NAS may have that now, and I'm just not aware. But you know, you had asked me what would definitely help with the adaptation, and some of that would be also the ability for that to be automated through code development. So it's part of the software development lifecycle, or SDLC, and part of your CI/CD, or continuous iteration and continuous deployment, right? So building all that in, so it's literally automated into everything that the teams are doing, would also be a major
So I
step.
know that,
Just to add to my answer from before.
yeah, with the LSO, the standards that are being developed around, and API standards in particular, I don't know. I think that's some of what they're addressing, but that'd probably be a good conversation to have with some of the MEF folks about the need for standardization, not just between the service providers and enterprises, but also for within development teams, that they could be utilizing these things regardless of the service provider.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, interesting. Well, I think thank you very much then for your time, and thank you all. I appreciate that. It's been a long day. We're the last guys here, so thank you, and hopefully this has been informative and helpful. Oh, got a question.
I have a question.
Yeah.
And this is for Francisco and also for Michael. Is there anything in the area of false positives that actually you can speak to that
Yeah.
are concerns of your viewpoint?
You have a very interesting standpoint on false positives, so I'll let
Yeah.
you start.
Yeah, because I mean, in theory, you could build an AI model, especially for cybersecurity, which will detect any kind of malware. Just basically write some code and say, okay, every file which comes in, every check what you do, just say that's malicious. You will detect every malware which is coming in. Perfect. But of course, that's super ineffective. Of course, that's not something which you can use in an enterprise. So basically, then translating it now back into the real, not funny world. AI, especially in cybersecurity, has two costs. One is really missing on malicious attacks, but also the other cost is, it might basically cost too many false alerts. So really thinking about that, thinking about this question, how costly is it in terms of false alerts, that's very, very important. And I think, also thinking about how can you, let's say, given a fixed number of alerts, how effective is it? Or will it be, let's say, with the maximum level of effectiveness, what will be the costs in terms of false alerts? I think that's a very, very important question from an AI user perspective as well. And I think will also help then making, let's say, the decision about what AI model to choose to implement are also quite informative. So how costly is it, not just from an economic perspective, from a fee one needs to pay, but also how costly is it in terms of the errors, like on the false positive side.
Yeah.
And I think that's a very, very important factor to consider.
Yeah, I'd say from a cyber side, especially at the boardroom level or at the executive suite level, right? Having too many false negatives becomes a PR problem for me as the CISO, right? Because I'm reporting in, we're dealing with another incident, we're looking into another incident, we're burning more resources, I'm paying outside third parties, I've engaged all the other contracts and work that we're doing. I've spun up legal and 5 other departments to make sure that we're doing this, because if you're like us, a global corporation, I have everything from European privacy clocks that just started ticking to you name it, right? And then we're going to get huge fines if we don't report things within certain time periods. It becomes a PR problem with that if the system's throwing too many, the sky is falling type moments, and it makes it very hard, especially when I need to start talking about budget and future headcount, right? It's far better, I think, in both of our answers for there to be, if there was going to be one side that you had superfluous feedback from, would be more the false positive, right?
Yeah.
Because at least in that case, we can look at it and evaluate it, and we haven't started a response cycle that might be coming.
That's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, for a few, as you know, we've been testing for a lot of years, and one of the challenges with intrusion prevention when it first came out was that customers could tell if it slowed the network down.
Yes.
They could tell if it threw a false positive,
Mhm.
but they couldn't tell that it missed something until
Right.
much later on. And then, of course, it was an APT or some
Right.
advanced threat or something, even though it was a kid in Dublin, right?
The unknown is always the boogeyman
Right.
in the closet, right?
Right.
We couldn't catch it because we didn't know it existed.
Right, and same thing with evasions. We were being told for years from a number of folks, including Gartner, that, well, evasions aren't real, we don't ever see them. And we had a lot of evasions in our, so, well, the reason you're not seeing
That's a very
them.
sophomoric argument, don't you?
Well, it really was. But
Evasions can't be real because we don't
it-
see them. That's the point of an evasion.
well, exactly, exactly. You don't see it because you don't see it. But that's the whole point. How do you strike that balance? I mean, is there a metric that you think should be published so that people are kind of aware where that is? And with that, is that kind of an answer you're looking for, or was that helpful?
Actually, the answer was both of these gentlemen as they spoke about it. I think there's a numerical number.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I was, okay.
Yeah,
I think it's a loss ratio.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is.
yeah. I think
False negatives and false positives have their own universes, their own problems. But I think the false positives are more important
Mhm.
because you don't want to break networks.
Right.
And in a certain way, from a CISO perspective, you expect that a certain cybersecurity tool will detect, or a sophisticated cybersecurity tool will detect malicious traffic. But then it's the question, will it basically block my network by raising too many false alerts? Will it be, or what is the costs that come with this kind of effectiveness in the detection? If you have 2 or 3 AI cybersecurity tools which are equally effective, of course you will make your decisions based on the lower number of false alerts.
Mhm.
So you
Right.
want to optimize the number
So
of
it's
false
the
alerts.
context of the false positive with regards to the effectiveness that really matters.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think it's important, as you have said, in terms of the metric which should be published, to really also look at the false positive rate. So when you are basically conducting the testing, not just looking into samples which just are entirely malicious, but also samples which contain benign files or just benign files, and then see, okay, how many times will the model block that? Because I think that's a very, very informative metric which can be quite informative.
So we're being asked by CISA and some others to start testing with secure by default policies, but from the vendors, right? And it's one of the things that's a bit scary for some of the vendors because they know that their default policies tend to have very few false positives because they're trying to get it in the network easily. But then customers don't realize that they need to actually ratchet up the security oftentimes, right? But now if that's how they're going to be measured and competing, then the default policies are going to not only worry about false positives, but have to balance that in regards to security, which I think is the U.S. government's intent. So that it's a very interesting question you asked there, I think. Anybody else? No? Okay, well, I'll try to get us off the stage again. Thank you very much for your time, and hopefully this has been informative and at least a little bit entertaining. So,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.